Please listen carefully.
Hello, universe. Welcome to the Optimist Daily Update. I'm Summers McKay.
And I'm Kristy Jansen, and we are part of the team behind the Optimist Daily, attempting to make solutions the news. We bring you reader-funded solutions news every day in order to change the tenor of news media, social media, and the direction of your day to help make it one focused on solutions.
7 days a week, we publish positive news stories written by award-winning journalists and delivered online to your inbox and through our social channels. And also, we are sharing these solutions in a commute-worthy, walk-worthy, home office-worthy, need something to lift you out of the darkness-worthy podcast. Today is Thursday, the 2nd of September, 2021.
Hey.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
I definitely could use something to lift me out of the dark place. I just feel like I'm tired of this whole separated from each other thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and because that's what's happening for me. I don't know if I've mentioned on the pod or not, but I have a very close group of extended friends and family, and many of whom, not everybody, but many of whom are vaccinated. Some of them won't for whatever reason, or are not able to because of health issues, or are too young because they're under the age of 12. Mm-hmm. And they're not. So they have kids anyway. But in general, there was a group of about 40 friends who were all vaccinated. And anyway, there's been a tremendous amount of breakthrough infections.
Right.
And it's basically a mass spread event, and it's now freaked out everyone else that we know. So my mother, for example, did test positive for COVID, and she had to isolate for a full 10 days or however long until she got over that. And nobody's had a serious case, thank goodness, partly because they are vaccinated, I believe. But maybe it's because of where I live in this world, in this country, it's really panicked a lot of my friends and contacts. So now I'm again back in an isolation case. Yep. I just hate it so much. I miss being able to visit with people that I really care about. And I miss being able to hug my friends and go out to lunch with them. I just hate it.
Yeah, we're struggling. I live in a different part of the country that has a wider spread out environment. There is less of an emotional reaction to COVID. However, there continue to be breakthrough cases, as well as cases against people who are not, cases for people who are not vaccinated. And our school, the classrooms keep getting closed, and they get closed because when a member of the pod, whoever's in that classroom, is positive for COVID, or one of the adults is positive for COVID, the entire pod, because these are little children who do not wear masks and cannot be vaccinated, the entire classroom shuts down for 5 days. And everyone has to get tested. And it is this intense roller coaster where every time I get an email, my heart drops, because while it has happened to our classroom once, there are 2 teachers in our classroom, so it very easily could happen a second time. And we're having a classroom change. All of our students everybody's going up a classroom. So this little pod that I've been with, this family that I have been safe with for a year, or, the better part of this year, now we're all going to be in different classrooms, and our kids are getting divided up. And I have to come up with a new group of moms and dads that we know that when we get shut down together. So we're potentially having a small gathering of the current classroom this Saturday as an end of year swim party. And the moms and I who are planning it are putting in all of these protocols where we're going to have picnic blankets spread out. So every family has their own picnic blanket and is far away from one another. And even though our kids all play together, somehow we're going to try to keep all the parents as far apart as possible. And it is really stressful.
I don't know. I just hate having to contemplate everything. I mean, giving rides to kids and, I've been asked to help drive other kids to school for my son, but everybody has to wear a mask when they're in the car together. It just feels like no. And
it just feels awful.
It just feels awful. And it is what it is. And I don't know, I'm reading this book right now called Firefighter Zen, which I was telling you and Amelia about yesterday. I'm just going to read this little quote and then we'll get into our stories for the day. Because it's Pema Chodron and her book, When Things Fall Apart. And I love Pema Chodron. The quote is, like all explorers, we are drawn to discover what's waiting out there without knowing yet if we have the courage to face it. And I just feel like that's where I'm at.
That's where you're at.
That's where I'm at. I don't know if I have the courage to face it all, but I do want to discover what's going on in the world. And that's where I go to the Optimist Daily.
Yeah, I was going to say, and where, when we doubt that we have the courage, do we go? We go to the Optimist Daily because at the very least, we know we're going to read 10 to 20 stories on any given day that are positive, inspiration-based, solution-focused news stories.
Yeah. So today, the cool factor for me, or the stories that go, yeah, that's kind of interesting. I couldn't really decide about the two headlines, or I'm putting them together because they're both about cleaning up water, which I feel like is one of those parts of the world we take for granted too much of the time. Clean water.
Yes.
And just because we don't happen to live in it doesn't mean that we're not absolutely dependent upon it. It's one of the most common environmental concerns. Anyway, the two headlines, the first one is nano jars can help remove CO2 and other major pollutants from water. And this is kind of cool, and I'll go deep into that. And there's also a headline about a group of students using bubbles and robots to help clear the world's rivers. So I just love that, and the initiative there with these young people that's in Switzerland. But the article I'm going to head into or do a deep dive to is the nano jars, which are, and that's in quotations, because they're not exactly jars, but it's the idea that we get so concerned with carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, which is clearly something we have to worry about because it has tremendous greenhouse warming effects. But one of the things you don't consider that much is it's not just in our atmosphere, it also gets into our oceans. And it actually is a huge problem there. It's just contributing to making them more acidic and less beneficial for the animals and plants that are living in the ocean. So in a bid to have a solution to this problem, some researchers have recently developed something they're calling nano jars, which capture the carbon dioxide and other pollutants from the water. Okay, so they're essentially molecules consisting of a copper ion and a hydroxide that in repeating units, and this is suspended in an organic solvent. So it's other chemicals you put them in the water, they kind of hang together. And when they come into contact with positively charged ions that are found in major pollutants like chromate, arsenate, phosphate, carbonate, the molecules neutralize the target by wrapping around them. They kind of become jars. It's like a little jar around the chemicals, which are actually pollutants for the water.
So they sort of wrap them up and encapsulate them and take them with them.
Yeah, and so then those sort of jars are able to be taken out of the water because the solvent floats on top of the liquid, forming a layer on the surface. And once that solvent is pulled out of the water, the trapped ions can be removed without too much hassle. There's a weak acid that you can use. It's sort of a biochemical process that helps to clear these pollutants out of the water. And I just think it's really cool. And the EPA is looking at figuring out how to use this. Other scientists, this is reported in New Atlas. So I just like the idea of these nano jars, which are little
itty bitty
agents,
tiny jars,
chemical
grabbing bad things out of the water, pulling them to the top and saying, "Skim me." And then maybe it's the robots and the bubbles that are then skimming them off. Maybe these two solutions should be working together.
Well, because we talk a lot about ocean plastic all the time and how it endangers wildlife and humans. And we know that millions of tons, 12 million tons of plastic end up in the ocean each year, but it actually comes a lot from our rivers. And so that's this story is all about, is how do you pull microplastics out of the rivers before they get into the ocean. And there's a group of students at ETH University in Zurich, and they are looking at putting together some robots that also have pressurized gas tubes called bubble curtains that are placed at the bottom of a river that create this constant upward flow of air bubbles, which pushes the plastic particles to the surface, which makes it easier to collect. So again, it's bringing things up from the bottom and to the surface so that you can, it's the same kind of idea. It's just one's a tiny little nano jar and the other is creating an air bubble blanket that pushes it to the top of the river.
I love it. I love it. Well, I love your stories because cleaning up water does inspire both of us, and we know that clean water will keep us healthy. But there's also a way to keep us healthy by knowing how to treat what might be wrong with us. My solution, which got me inspired today, particularly because I am in a constant battle against infections with a toddler and a teenager, my headline reads, virus or bacteria? There is a test that aims to tell in minutes. Now, everyone knows when you go to a doctor with a sickness that you can't seem to shake, usually a doctor tries to figure out if it's bacterial or viral infection. Bacterial infections are often treated relatively efficiently with antibiotics, but prescribing them unnecessarily for a viral infection can actually increase antibiotic resistance. So this test is basically a rapid test based on gene expression, which will help determine the cause of an illness with certainty. It relies on the fact that each pathogen activates a different set of genes. This in turn varies RNA or protein production, which can be detected in a small blood sample. The test creators partnered with a company called BioFire to test the product on more than 600 emergency room patients and successfully identified bacterial infections with 80% accuracy and viral with nearly 87% accuracy. So the test is going to be available hopefully soon for more healthcare practitioners. And as a mom who's constantly trying to figure out when's the next time I have to give the next round of antibiotics for this latest ear infection, hopefully there'll be an at-home test soon enough too. And that will perhaps save us a few trips to the pediatrician. Nonetheless, these stories are exciting to me. Cleaner water, healthier kids, and there's so much more in the Optimist Daily. Kristy, we have Arizona abolishing a peremptory challenge to improve juror diversity. There is simple technology that could store energy by lifting and dropping giant bricks, probably also while the bricks are dancing. This is how we could put our urban rooftops to better use. There is get the most out of autumn with this foliage map. What else, Kristy? What else do we have on the Optimist Daily?
Apparently, leaded gasoline has officially been globally discontinued. That's great for, getting some pollutants out of our gasoline cars. There's an article about how healthy eating habits reduce stress levels. That and more on the Optimist Daily. We are so happy to have you here. Thanks so much for listening to the Optimist Daily Update. We promise to keep sharing positive solution-based stories, trying to find ways to lift you up from your darkest moods like me, and also giving you ideas on how you can participate in the changing world, help ensure that it's changed for the positive direction to make everything better for everyone. We promise to keep covering current events, even if they're a little sad or disturbing, with as much accuracy as we can, with legitimate sources, and offering you information that is very useful for helping to chart new paths for all of us. And if you haven't already done so, please consider becoming an emissary if you have the means on theoptimistdaily.com. And for starting at just $5 a month, you can help support independent journalism, which is reader funded, and be a part of the solution changing consciousness that addresses our world's biggest challenges with a problem solving mindset.
Thank you, everyone. Let's keep the Optimist Daily free to those who need it, supported by those who can. Thank you for being in our community of optimists who are sometimes pulling ourselves out of some lower days for higher opportunities. Kristy, you are amazing. I am grateful for you, and thank you for what you do to help keep the world optimistic.